Welcome to Civil Justice for SA Survivors.
Hello and welcome to Civil Justice for SA Survivors with attorneys Marc Pearlman and Melissa Anderson. Marc and Melissa have spent decades representing survivors of SA, which stands for sexual assault and exploitation in Illinois courts. Together they combine legal experience with a trauma-informed approach that places compassion and safety at the center of every case. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're beginning this series by asking what civil justice really means for survivors and how it can help them move forward. Marc, Melissa, great to have you both here.
Good to be here. Thanks,
nice
Kevin.
Nice to be here.
So before we dive in, can you guys each share a bit about your background and what led you to dedicate part of your practice to representing survivors of SA?
Sure. I grew up involved in many sports. I played football through college. So I was often involved with things that involved large institutions. And I always had coaches and teachers around me. So that was a big part of my life. When I became a lawyer, the first 10 years of my practice, I was in commercial litigation. So I was really representing businesses in their disputes with one another. And then in 2002, a family member called me about an SA event that occurred. And I had no experience in that. However, I was able to help them through that case by teaming up with another lawyer who was experienced in handling SA cases. Since 2002, we have handled over 800 cases involving SA. It's the only area of law that we practice now today. We don't handle any other types of cases other than SA. And that's just, we're at a point in our careers where we want to do what's meaningful and really motivates us. And this is a cause for us.
Yeah, my background was similar. I was also doing commercial litigation for the early part of my career. For about 15 years, I was doing that. And then started working with Marc on the SA cases, and it really just became a passion and cause of mine to the point where that's almost exclusively what I've spent the last 10 years doing. It's really, I found a space that needs people to focus on exclusively when they're practicing law. It's hard to do SA work and other work at the same time because it's such a unique area and requires a different approach in handling cases. So that's really what I've focused the last 10 years on doing.
You've chosen a heavier area of the law for sure. Is it difficult for you guys to balance the emotional aspect of it? I mean, it's hard not to feel something for these victims and these survivors.
I think it's important that you don't lose that you always do bring, do feel for your clients and try to bring as much understanding as you can. Obviously, there's a balance, just like our clients need to practice self-care when you're doing this type of work. It's important that you do balance that so that you can bring everything you can to the table when you're speaking with your clients. It's heavy, but on the flip side, it's just so rewarding seeing the difference that you can make in someone's life and see the change that your clients go throughout the process. And you know, your hope in doing this is that you bring them some relief. And when you see that happen, it really is so rewarding that the difficult part becomes less of a burden.
Worth it.
Well worth it. And Melissa and I speak all the time about the most valuable thing we get out of this work is our connection that we form with our clients.
Talking about our theme today of civil justice, what does civil justice truly look like for someone who has experienced SA, a survivor of SA?
I think it's different for every person. I think there's certain things that are common among all of our clients, which is initially feeling heard and believed and being an ear for them to tell their story, often for the first time. What justice ultimately looks like, though, can be very different for different people.
What is typical though is justice for them, and why they reach out to us is very seldom about the money. That ends up being the remedy we can get in courts. But very few of our clients have reached out to us because they're looking for a monetary recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's bigger. It's bigger than the
Much
dollars. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That
Much
makes
bigger.
sense. Yeah, I feel like many survivors and many people in general only really hear about the criminal process. I mean, especially considering what we watch on TV, what we see in the movies. It's always, this is a common theme in TV and movies, and it's always about the criminal process. How is the civil case different, and what kinds of accountability or results can it achieve that maybe the criminal system can't?
Oftentimes when clients call us, they're under the impression, because of what they often see on TV, or they're just not that um, informed about how the legal system works. They think that as civil lawyers that we can prosecute and send their perpetrator to jail, which when you engage with a civil lawyer, it's not possible to do that. We can only bring a lawsuit for your damages. That said, we often encourage our clients to call law enforcement and see if there's the potential to have a criminal case, and we'll walk them through that process. Oftentimes the criminal process is really intimidating and difficult for clients, and we understand that, so we really guide them through that process as well. But in the civil justice system, what we can do is we can get accountability with respect to their perpetrator, and equally, if not more importantly, the institutions that allow their perpetrators to do this to them.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And for someone listening who might not know whether they have a civil case or not, what kind of situations or relationships typically fall under this area of the law?
There's so many different types of special relationships where there's trust placed in another person and reliance on that trust and protection. You see it with teachers and students, obviously in coaching situations, a lot of clergy relationships as well, with parishioners, and sadly children and clergy. We also unfortunately see it a lot in the medical space. Doctors taking advantage of the vulnerability in that relationship that results in SA. Oftentimes in the workplace as well. It's a lot of the same relationships like you were talking about that you see on TV, where it's the theme of SA in those relationships. It's mostly less of our cases involve SA with family members. Really, it's bigger institutions, or individuals who work for bigger institutions that have been placed in a position of trust, and have exploited that.
And I would say, in terms of recently, the cases that have been in the press a lot are the Catholic Church cases, the Boy Scouts, and universities, like the gymnastics Michigan State issue. But it could be any relationship. It could be an employment relationship, or a school, or coaching, as Melissa said.
With involving adults and children.
Yeah, what tends to happen in those first conversations with survivors? What do they usually want to know from you guys, and how do you maintain that feeling of safety for them? Because I imagine that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it, Kevin. And really, in the first call, we do not ask them to share the details of what happened to them. It's amazing. In the last 20 years, I would say hundreds of our clients have said that they've been thinking about calling us for a year. They've actually picked up the phone, hit every digit except the last digit, and hung up before they hit the last digit. When they ultimately get the courage to and the ability to come forward and talk about it, we really want to make them as comfortable as possible. So we want to make sure that, as Melissa talked about, what's important, that they're heard and they're believed. And we create an environment that fosters that. And we really don't get into the details of their essay until a second or third conversation. And if what they want to know is there anything that could be done? And the answer is typically yes, but depending on the facts, what can be done differs from case to case.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that initial call and what's covered and how it goes is largely dependent on the person that's calling and where they are in terms of discussing their essay. Oftentimes we're the first person they've ever told. And in those conversations, it really is about listening. And that's a lot for someone to do. So those conversations really don't dig in on the step-by-step approach that we plan to take. We really answer any questions they want answered, but understanding sometimes that initial call is them sharing their story for the first time and making that initial introduction and them leaving that conversation knowing that we'll move forward after that, but we're going to do it at their own pace.
And just to emphasize how rare it is, of every maybe 1 of 10 survivors of SA ever come forward. The other, so we're talking about 10%. The other 90%, Kevin, take it to their grave.
Yeah.
They suffer in silence forever.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, that is very true. I've heard stats like that before, and it's understandable, but it's still sad nonetheless.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
You mentioned how a lot of these cases involve larger institutions, schools, churches, whatnot. How do you approach holding these entities accountable while sort of protecting your clients from going through everything again, retraumatization, that sort of thing?
As you said, these are big institutions, and I feel like it's our job in doing this to protect and be the buffer there so that our clients never feel like they're going up against a big institution. So really our approach with them is from the outset, when I say them, the institution, setting the tone that how we move forward is going to be dictated not by them. And we are going to be a huge part of defining where things are going to go and the pace that we're going to go. And obviously in court, there's a piece of that that involves a judge or the court system in terms of moving things along. But I think the important part is setting the tone from the beginning and making the people you're working with on the other side understand this isn't a slip and fall case. This isn't a car accident. Right. This is the worst thing that has ever and arguably can happen to a person. And that's the subject matter, and that we demand that it be treated with the respect and that it deserves in the process. So, that's setting the tone from the outset and making sure throughout the process that we are the buffer there and we're protecting our clients from those institutions.
You've described your practice as trauma informed. Can you describe what exactly that means and how it looks in a day-to-day case strategy?
Yeah, I'm going to let Melissa describe the details of the trauma informed. But I want to say that I think what really differentiates our practice from most other law firms is that we do not treat the SA cases like a typical legal case. It's much, as you said, Kevin, it's much bigger than that. We understand that getting our clients a monetary recovery is only one of the elements that are really, really important. The most important thing is that they are in a better place at the end of a process, at the end of the process, than they were at the beginning. And that there is a significant part of the process, most of the process deals with their healing. Their healing and them feeling like it was a process where they had power and control.
Yeah. And from when I think of being trauma informed in terms of handling these cases, the most important thing is understanding throughout the process the impact that this trauma has had sometimes on every aspect of our clients' lives. So in every conversation, in every step of the way, having that be what's guiding you in terms of how you interact with your clients. From the outset, we do need to constantly remind ourselves that trust is not assumed, that our clients often have a very difficult time trusting anyone. So they're certainly not going to start this process trusting us. And that's something that needs to be earned, and understanding that we will do what we can to try to earn that trust. So just from the outset, understanding that the impact of trauma is widespread and often impacting our clients' lives in ways that they don't yet even understand. And the second piece of it, I think, is making sure that you're doing everything you can throughout the process not to re-traumatize your client. So I do what I can to try to be transparent with our clients and keep them informed about what's going on in the process or in their case. And in terms of not re-traumatizing them, we've consulted with therapists about what our process is and how can we accomplish the same goal in the least damaging way. So in terms of when we ask our clients for certain information, how we do that, and how we mold the entire process to make sure not only that we're not re-traumatizing our clients, but also our goal is really to try to use this process to promote their healing. And Marc and I always say it's a success when our client is in a better place at the end of the process than they were when they first picked up the phone, which that's when we feel like we've succeeded in a case. And so when you say trauma informed, that's in my mind what it's about, making sure that you're helping somebody promote healing, doing as little damage or no additional damage to their lives.
And a big part of that also involves knowing or appreciating the things that may trigger our clients. And the truth of the matter is that SA survivors are often triggered by things that would not trigger you or you or me, right?
Yep.
And with experience, we've come to know the things that will trigger them and try very hard to avoid those things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you haven't been through it, it's really hard to understand the triggers. But for you guys, because you're around it all the time, you can have more of an understanding, more of an empathy towards that because of your experience.
Yeah, exactly. And we see all the time though. I don't like using the word understand because I genuinely believe that unless you've been through it, you can't understand it.
Yeah.
What we can do is have empathy and appreciate it based on our experience with, over 800 survivors.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Civil Justice for SA Survivors with Marc Pearlman and Melissa Anderson. If you'd like to learn more or speak confidentially with their team, visit pearlmananderson.com for resources and contact information. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Please share this with anybody who could use it. We really want to get this message out there. And Marc and Melissa, really great meeting you both, having you both here. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to chatting with you further.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.